Okay, we are live. Matt, welcome to the podcast. I appreciate you
Thank you.
joining me today. We're going to be talking about age-banded healthcare plans. Matt is the CFO of our company, so I'm going to let him tell him about himself. I think it'd be best to hear it firsthand.
Yeah, just excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Been involved with the company now for a little over 2.5 years. My background was banking, believe it or not. So that's all I ever did beforehand was in banking for 20 years for a community bank, and uh, really enjoyed that. But loving what I'm doing as a CFO for a manufacturing company, and enjoying every day of it. So I appreciate the invite.
Absolutely. Well, without further ado, we're going to jump into our content. Today, we're going to go through the background history of age-banded plans, functionality of the plans, our company history with healthcare in general, leading up to offering age-banded plans. We're then going to review two unethical choices and their implications on the actors and the stakeholders. We will analyze the ethical breaches and the laws that would be violated, and finally, solutions will be offered for the unethical decisions. So, age-banded healthcare plans came from the Affordable Care Act, ACA, which originated from the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act as it is formally known, or Obamacare as it is informally known. The goal of ACA is to make insurance more available and affordable to all people. Fun little historical fact there. Age-banded plans appeared in 2014, so a little over 11 years ago, as the ACA's major provisions came to pass. The ACA guarantees coverage to all individuals despite pre-existing conditions, and also under ACA, partial community ratings allow premiums to vary based on location and age. So we're starting to sound like an age-banded plan now. So healthcare, age-banded plans, healthcare that offers premiums that vary with age. The older the employee, the more the premium will cost. So the functionality of the plan is under the ACA, age became a factor as plans vary depending on age. As we've said, premiums are based on the three bands of 0 to 20, 21 to 63, and 64 and older. So premiums also cannot be more than 3 times what is being charged for younger employees. So fun little facts there as well.
Yes.
In this scenario, we have the ethical actors of our company leadership, insurance companies, and third-party administrators. Our stakeholders are our employees and their insured family members. Matt, how would you describe the ethical actors and stakeholders? Am I forgetting anyone in this scenario?
I don't believe so. I just think that there's times where those lines can cross. An example of that would be an ESOP company where the employees are also, in a sense, owners of the companies too. So there are times where those lines get a little bit blurred, but no, you've got them outlined perfectly.
And it is worth noting in our scenario, we are an ESOP, so we do have that blurring of lines occurring.
Yes.
From the financial perspective, the functionality of the plan and how it pertains to the actors and stakeholders, how would you describe that for us?
Well, two things. One, I mean, insurance is the biggest expense other than wages that we have within the company. So it's from management's perspective, going out. We every time when our policy matures, we go out and try to bid that out and find the best possible scenario for both us as the ethical actors, and then the stakeholders being the employees. So we're trying to constantly balance that between what's best for the company and what's best for the employees.
Gotcha. Well, with that in mind, would you mind to recap the last couple of years for us, our company journey, our history with healthcare, how we ended up in the situation having to offer age-banded healthcare plans?
Yes, so the last 2 years have been interesting. We got our renewal going into 2023. We had up until that point, we were under 50 employees, so we were able to be a part of a program with the state of Missouri that really allowed us some very good coverage. When we jumped over that, we had to get out of that. And so after our first year, we had some unfortunate incidents within the company that really bumped up our premiums. Our loss ratio was high. That carried into 2024. We got another big increase. And for the first time in 2024, our employees had to pay a small part of their insurance. We had paid 100% all the way up into that point. And for the first time, they were paying, employees were asked to pay $100 a month, was the cost to them. And then again, this year with the big increase, we had to look at other options. And what was proposed to us was going with an age banded policy. So we reviewed that and figured that that was the best way for us to go.
Right. So it was either that or nothing, and that's
Yep.
illegal. So yes, it
Yes.
was the only fork in the road for us, actually.
Yep. Absolutely.
Was there anything the company could have done different to prevent age-banded plans from being our only option?
In this scenario, I don't believe so because the reason why we had to do that, we had a couple of serious health issues within the company that just, that's something that we can't help. That's something that the person can't help. But it's something that all companies have to deal with when that happens. And so what we've got to offer health insurance. We've got to provide health insurance. But what ends up happening is that cost is a cost that the company incurs and a cost that the employees incur because that rate does go up substantially. So there's just nothing that we can do to change that situation, unfortunately.
Gotcha. Well, thank you for that recap. That leads us to our first unethical choice. Of course, our company made a good, sound decision, but for the sake of the assignment to discuss unethical decisions, I will highlight our first choice.
Okay.
If we extend the age-banded benefit to the employees and ask the older employees to pay an extra 10%, while the company pays 50%, they would be paying 60%. So you can see how this is shaping up. This could discourage them from enrolling. Their premium would actually be higher than in fact it really is. It would also put more money in our pockets. It would bring down our average age of insured of employees if they decided not to enroll, reducing our overall cost. So this surplus of money would likely be spent unethically on bonuses that we may not be able to extend to leadership team, considering the increased healthcare expenses. So obviously this is a highly illegal situation
Yes.
and discriminatory against the older population, also a misrepresentation of the true cost of healthcare. So in this situation, that would be a manipulation of the benefit design, creating our own composite rate. This is a violation of the Employment Retirement Income Security Act of 1974, otherwise known as ERISA, which
Yes.
states that if an employer charges more, sets their own composite rate for the coverage than the insurance company actually charges for the employee premiums, it is illegal and a violation of ERISA, according to the U.S. Department of Labor. So, Matt, discuss the apparent violation here that the company would commit if we set our own composite rate, and have you ever seen companies violate ERISA in this manner in a business setting?
Yeah, so ERISA is something that all companies are very keenly aware of, and you definitely don't want an ERISA violation. Fortunately, I have not seen that happen. We always are following the guidelines set by ERISA. I can see where that would be a temptation for companies in some scenarios to do that, but thank goodness we've got ERISA in place that hopefully prevents that situation from happening. Because essentially, what you're doing is you're just taking advantage of employees, and specifically you're being discriminatory towards an older group or a group of employees that then in this particular situation are your older employees. So something that all companies would want to stay away from, but again could see where that could potentially tempt some people to do that.
Almost forces the hand at
Yep.
times. So What are some possible solutions you could think of for this unethical choice?
Well, the possible solutions are the ones that we have taken for our company in doing an age banded policy, but making sure that we are following the guidelines that are set out by ERISA and not going through and developing our own composite rate. They're all rates that are provided by the insurance company, and then we go in our scenario we've got a set amount that we pay for all employees. And
Mhm.
so we're not setting a composite rate. It's we are paying the same amount for all employees. And then the composite rate that's given gives the difference that would be paid at that point.
Gotcha. One other solution that I came up with that would promote transparency would be a committee. And this would be grounded in through the common good lens, which is an ethical framework lens for making good decisions in business. I feel like if we could create a committee that was representative of not only various ages, first and foremost, but all the different levels of employment within our company, this committee could gather to discuss the options and perhaps even be involved in the decision making, also be heavily educated on the plan and its functionality so that they could in turn inform their colleagues. So this would just create a very transparent educational loop within the company to avoid unethical decisions such as creating your own composite rate.
Yes.
So again, making this ethical choice through a common good lens, which is addressing something, a good choice for the whole group.
Yes.
So if we did that, if we went through a committee with, that large representation of our demographic, what is an ethical upside and downside or strength and weakness you could see to that choice?
Oh, I think it would be a great decision to make and involve get a group that covers all of the different age groups within the company and make sure that each one is represented by that, and then being able to lay out the different decisions that are in front of us and let everyone look at it ahead of time. We what's interesting on the insurance side and where you run into a problem is typically there's a very short window of time that you have between, and I don't know if that's designed specifically by the insurance companies because they don't want you to have a whole lot of time to go bid things out. But typically, the time that we get the renewal rates and the time that we actually have to go in and renew is a very short window of time. So, given that situation, already having your committee in place and ready because you're usually talking like a week, 2 weeks max. So
Mm-hmm.
being able to do that, look at the different policies, get bids, present all of this information to your committee where they have an opportunity to help with that decision. I love that. And that's something that we'll be doing in the future. But it just, you have to have everything prepped because you do have a very short window. You don't have months to look at the situation.
No, unfortunately, and what is up with that? It is always that way. It's always your hair's on fire, hurry fast.
Yep.
I've never thought about that, but you're right. That is a common theme. So I could see starting that about maybe 6 months before needed and really educating the committee members on what's coming, and that could be very, very beneficial for all parties involved. I um I also think a potential weakness would be that, the added complexity of the information they're going to be receiving may not be interpretable for all. I mean, it's very convoluted, very complicated at times. So that could be a downside or a weakness. Also, I do believe it would require a leader of some kind from, upper management to sit in on those meetings, which
Yeah.
at times may also require, conflict resolution skills. So you would have to have just the right person leading that committee to mitigate any potential issues there. It maybe could also create unfair balance of responsibility for that leadership member, or even the employees may perceive it as such, like, I don't want this responsibility to make this decision.
Yeah.
It could go
Well,
a few different
and
ways.
two, we deal with that often, and there's a lot that goes into these health insurance policies, right? So when you get a complex issue and you get a whole lot of people involved, it's great to involve other people, but at the same time, you know that the information that's discussed is going to get out to all of the employees, which isn't a bad thing as long as as the information is correct and consistent. And so if you get a lot of people involved in that, and
Mhm.
they don't quite understand everything, or they're putting their own spin on it and taking it to employees, you could create some issues there too. So I think a small group that has a very detailed amount of information that you want them to be able to have to look at this, maybe looking at last year's stuff so that they're already familiar with that and then can look at the new information coming in would be a good way to handle it.
Correct. Yeah, I agree. Um, so, the committee would also, like you were saying, make the assumption that the employees on each level want to participate. We would really need to vet them, like you said, and make sure they have the desire to do this deep dive. It's also assuming they're capable of understanding the complexities of healthcare options. It's also assuming that they will choose the most reasonable option. That's putting, like I said, a really heavy responsibility
Yes,
on certain people that maybe don't have the capacity or even the desire to make that decision. So,
you bet.
a potential bias for this solution would be affinity bias, like me bias, which is the unconscious tendency to favor the familiar in terms of people, environments, interests, and experiences. So, to address the common good for all employees, the committee would need to represent the needs and concerns of all, not just one demographic. Failing to do so would challenge specific demographics left out in the healthcare decision, causing their needs to go unmet. So the committee, although initially it's like it's the answer, it could get pretty
Right.
complicated.
Yeah.
What impact would that have on leadership if we did move forward with a committee for transparency, for gathering everyone's needs and desires, all ages, all employment levels? Like, what impact would that have on leadership?
Well, it could be very positive. There could be negative impacts too. I mean, the positive impact is when you have big decisions, getting other people involved that are part of your company, especially with an ESOP situation, transparency is a big thing, trust among your employees. So if you're involving them, those are things that you are gaining, and it's a great thing to have that be a part of a big decision like that. The downside of that, you just hit on it. There's a lot of times that bias, whether you want it to or not, comes into play. So if you've got a policy, if you got, let's say that you got the young demographic that's covered within that, and they would have a better policy and not have to pay anything for that, then they're going to want that. But if they're looking at the common good amongst all, there may be a policy that's going to cost them a little bit more, but it also helps with the other age groups. So bias does come into play. You just have to really be careful and watch that. And then again, like we just hit on, the misinformation that can possibly come out of that situation, and them going to, typically they stick with their group of that same demographic within the company, and so that bias may come into play and misinformation may get spread throughout the company, and having to deal with that whole situation once that comes up. So good and bad could happen.
Yeah. Well, let's look into our next unethical choice, see what solution we can come up with here. So if those older employees do not pay that extra 10%, our made up composite rate, employment termination could be a consequence. This would then enable the company to attract future hires from a younger demographic, thereby lowering the average age of insured employees and reducing our healthcare expenses. So obviously, this is discrimination, would lead to discrimination in hiring, and I think that was my first thought when I first learned about age-banded plans, is how is this not ending up in discriminatory hirings? Because it's just like it's the forced hand almost
Yep.
unethically, obviously. But this is a violation of the Equal Employment Opportunities Commission, which dictates that employers must not discriminate against applicants and or employees because of many factors, of which age is applicable in this case, a protected class. The EEOC also monitors diversity, equity, and inclusion related discrimination cases. That's very much so shaky ground at the moment, although
Yes.
the not the ruling, the recommendation is to continue to follow DEI practices. So in this case, disparate treatment that resembles discriminatory hiring practices based on age is just a no-no. So when
Yes.
considering what the EEOC defines as age discrimination, do you think the company is putting itself in a precarious situation by moving forward with the age-banded plan?
So if the goal of the company was to have it where the older employees would leave the company because of that situation, their insurance cost is more. If that was the goal, then absolutely that company would be discriminating against those older employees and should suffer the consequences for that. Luckily, haven't been in that situation. I think where the biggest issue comes in is that's very blatant, right? If you're trying to cause your older employees to leave because of a situation like that, that's very blatant. What the harder situation or the thing that comes up most often, I would say, for companies is the hiring side of things. So if you've got employees that are equivalent in their work experience and their backgrounds, and there's an older employee and a younger employee, I would say that becomes the biggest issue for companies. And that's something that's a lot less likely to be brought up as discrimination because someone did get hired. They don't know who the other applicants are, but that's a situation, an ethical choice that companies have to make a lot and just always want to fall on the side that doesn't have any disparage treatment or any bad choices being made there. But I'd say companies have that all the time that come up.
Right. Yeah. Have you witnessed that ever in your previous employment in the banking sector?
I have witnessed it with companies that I dealt with, but luckily never within the company. We never had an issue with that within the banking side of things. But whenever you're someone's banker, it's like you're their therapist too, and they open up about everything within their companies.
Mm.
Insurance, health insurance being one of the largest expenses that they have. I've heard discussions from customers that I had that it was very open. Hey, this is what we have to do to help protect our company. We're making these decisions, and it's sad to say, but they were trying to do what they felt like was best for their company, but I think was probably some discrimination involved there too.
Gotcha. Well, a possible solution to this unethical choice, can you think of any off the top of your head?
What was that? Possible solutions?
Possible solutions to the unethical choice of, ultimately discriminatory hiring?
Yes, you want more than one in person, want more than one person interviewing and involved in that hiring process. Because again, bias comes into play. So if you've got only one person that's involved in that process, then you really take the chance that maybe some discrimination happens. If you've got three or four people involved in your hiring process, I think that it's a lot less likely that that would take place. So that would be the first thing. Luckily, in our company, we do not have one person that just does the hiring. There's multiple interviews, multiple people are involved in those interviews. HR is involved in that hiring process as well. So we really try to do the best possible job we can to look at all applicants and hire the best applicant. That's what it comes down to. Take everything else out of it. It doesn't matter what their age is, what any other possible discrimination situations might be there, take all those out of play and just hire the best applicant.
Right, right. Um, Backing on up to the other aspect of this unethical choice, the extra percentage we're requesting them to pay. Let's see. That you know, I lost my place. Where am I?
On the 10%?
Yes. So just paying a flat composite rate to all would mitigate that. Utilitarian, it would just be the same for all, and
Yep.
that would ethically frame that through the lens of fairness. An ethical upside and downside to that fixed percentage if we went that route. What would be the strengths and weaknesses of that for the company?
Well, I think, from the company's perspective, it's more related to the employee and what impact that it has on the employee, right? Like if everybody paying the same rate across the board, it becomes very easy. Now, are you affecting some people because of that? Yes, you're affecting your younger population typically in that scenario because they're paying a little bit more than what they would typically be paying otherwise because it's just the flat rate across your whole age group that you have. So you're constantly affecting somebody in one way or another. But the main thing is that you're not being discriminatory in your decision making and what's happening with that, not setting your own composite rate, doing those kind of things.
Right.
But
Yes.
yeah, it is affecting somebody on one end of the spectrum or the other. You can't help that.
Yeah, that is a challenge, and I agree that that would then put the younger demographic in an unfair situation. The assumptions that this fixed percentage makes could result in unintended ageism, as you just mentioned. If it is fair and not addressed, for example, like you just said, an older individual, let's say their monthly premium was $1,000, and we will pay 500.
Mhm.
That means 50%. But that younger individual with a 200 monthly premium pays 100. So the fixed percentage actually causes the premium to be less affordable again for the older demographic
Yep.
than the younger demographics. So a sliding scale employer contribution could provide a scale for which lower wage employees receive a higher percentage, for example. So
Yes.
additionally, the assumption is that the fixed percentage will eliminate unconscious ageism in hiring. Ultimately, that's where this leads to.
Yes.
So, like you said, a hiring team with multiple people. I also feel like if you redacted the age on resumes and did a bit of a blind hiring and make it based on skill and merit, that could potentially be a solution as well. So the bias here with unconscious ageism in hiring is that this occurs when hiring managers view candidates as expensive or affordable based on their age. So we're looking at people, again, through ageism. It could be mitigated by hiring managers being trained on knowing how to look for skill on a resume, knowing how to look for experience. And finally, what impact do you feel like creating a hiring team would have on leadership or any of these solutions we've discussed? Let's again, we our solution for the first unethical decision was a committee. So let's go with the hiring team. Let's say we pull together a
Yep.
hiring team, and now we've got to train this team, and there's a few extra steps involved. So what could you see
Yes.
the impact being on leadership in that scenario?
So, one, a very positive thing to leadership is it's going to take a lot of pressure off of leadership. If you've got let's say, just the department manager for whatever department that you're hiring for is the only person that makes that decision, right? That creates a lot of pressure for that person. So they're the only person involved in that. They may have four or five applicants. They're the only person interviewing those people, and then they're trying to make their decision just based upon what they heard, the experiences that they had with each one of those applicants. So if that's the case, and they're the only person that's involved with that, if they don't hire a good applicant and there's issues with that applicant, then your executive management team is going to be looking at that person. If they've got consistently bad hires, you've got to look at what they're doing and say, hey, we've got a problem here with them, with the way that they're hiring people. So just taking that pressure off and having them be a part of it, but not being the only person. If I'm that department head, I would rather have more people involved in that process. That's why we love what we do, and having, a team of people that interview. I know we were interviewing for an accounting position last year, and I think there were 4 people total involved in that process. Sarah, you were a part of that.
Hmm.
And so that is a great process to go through. And some of the best discussions that we have, it's so cool to hear everybody's take
Hmm.
and hear everybody's thoughts after that applicant leaves, and being able to discuss that and what some people may recognize that you didn't recognize. I know that there's so many good discussions that are brought up and things I don't even think of, and someone else catches on to that. I will say this too. I think having a healthy diversity within that group is very good as well.
Hmm.
When you have different genders involved with that, different ages involved with that, different backgrounds, it's just great because there's a lot of times things that different people pick up on, and bringing all that together makes sure that you get the best applicant and the
Right.
best person to fill that role.
Yeah. Eliminates the affinity bias, the like me
It
bias.
does.
And
Yeah.
I do think when for that particular hire, speaking about that particular hire, we had multiple ways we were tuning in. So I believe I was on Zoom
Yes.
and the rest of you were there in person. So
Yep.
while you were all able to pick up on body language and gestures, I was really listening for words. And then, of course, we all reviewed the resume. And so we had 3 different perspectives, really. And that was really, really
Yes.
beneficial. So, let's reveal how the company really handled this situation, because it sounds like these unethical behavior or choices that we've discussed, they are pretty egregious and obviously very illegal. So let's reveal how the company handled our age-banded healthcare situation.
So yeah, we went through, worked with our insurance company, looked at the different possibilities of what we could select. Went with a insurance policy that was age banded, but it was one that fell into all of the requirements for that. And we went in and met with all of our employees. We're very open and honest about the decision that we made, and just reviewed that, went through step by step with them, and showed what we were paying. It was a set amount that we were going to be paying for each employee, and it was the right way to handle the situation.
Gotcha. Well, I thank you for going through this with me and exploring the ways that it could be unethically handled, although age-banded plans are certainly legal. As we can see, there's a lot of ways that difficult situations can force it through the cracks and make it become an unethical choice. And so, just having awareness of that, I think is important. So, hopefully, anybody listening now has a solid understanding of age-banded plans, why they came about, how they're used, and how they can be used in an ethical manner. So, thank you for your time.
No problem. Good luck.